Hi, my name is Jean Gao, and I am a Chinese-American sophomore at Binghamton University. In this video, I will be making an on-case argument about inherency, 3 critiques on the Pledge of Allegiance, the Founding Fathers, and the usage of colored terms, followed by a disadvantage on the affirmative to pay reparations, and finally, a counterplan on improving education. My on-case argument is this. The proposition claims that African Americans in the United States are in need of freedom and rights in this country. However, African Americans already possess the freedoms and rights of any other member of the United States after the end of Jim Crow legislation. This shows a lack of inherency in the affirmative. My first critique is on the Pledge of Allegiance. The proposition states that the Pledge of Allegiance is a moral basis for reparations. However, the pledge was written by Francis Bellamy in 1892, who was a known bigot and xenophobe, who firmly believed in the mandatory segregation of public schools. Therefore, you should disregard this argument of the Pledge of Allegiance as a moral claim for reparations. My second critique is on the Founding Fathers as a historical claim for reparations. Proposition uses, and I quote, "the justice that our Founding Fathers founded this country on," as a historical claim for why reparations should be paid. However, the Founding Fathers James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington were all slave owners while slavery was legal, which is why you should disregard the Founding Fathers as a historical claim. My last critique is on the proposition's usage of the term whites, blacks, and yellow. It is dangerous to classify groups of people by the color of their skin because continued use of color terms only serves to further perpetuate systemic racism in the form of colorism, which is no better than the American colonials who enslaved countless African Americans in the first place. In addition, the proposition states that people in our country deserve a right, just because they are made by God and they are people. She continues, and I quote, "I almost said yellow, but then I was like, just kidding," which implies that the Asian Americans that she refers to as yellow are not considered people in this country, which effectively contradicts and nullifies her stance on the centuries of moral and historical wrongs inflicted upon the very African Americans she's proposing to pay reparations to, since African American slaves in the past were also not considered to be people and instead were considered as property. This is why you should disregard this argument based upon the proposition's usage of the words blacks, whites, and yellow. This is my disadvantage against the affirmative's plan to pay reparations. In her proposition, Ms. McGrath claims that paying reparations over an underspecified many years will help heal relationships between whites and blacks, as well as lead to a smoother government. However, the United States is currently on the brink of a recession, and the amount of reparations that the federal government will have to pay will surely tip us into a recession, which will lead to a larger income gap between wealthy Caucasians and impoverished African Americans, which will actually hurt the relationships between them, and in addition will lead to a crippled government, which is why you shouldn't vote for the affirmative. This is my counterplan. The reason why the payment of reparations by the U.S. federal government is unfeasible is because the causal chain is lost. It is unclear who the recipients of the reparations should be and who should provide the reparations. We cannot pay reparations to only the direct descendants of slaves because it's nearly impossible to verify who they are. Additionally, we shouldn't pay all African Americans reparations because there are many who immigrated to the United States after the abolition of slavery and after the end of Jim Crow legislation. And why should they be paid reparations if they never suffered under slavery? Furthermore, it's unclear how to treat those who once served as slaves but then were freed and became slave owners of their own right. Do we pay them the same amount as other African Americans? Do we pay them less? How much less? Alternatively, do we tax them for being slave owners? Because of the loss of this causal chain, a better solution is for the federal government to instead focus on improving education in impoverished African American-centric neighborhoods by increasing school funding, increasing after-school activities and tutoring opportunities, as well as providing general additional government support in the form of food stamps and other benefits. This will actually help elevate African Americans to a higher class standing and eventually reduce the income gap between African Americans and Caucasians, thereby healing their relationship and making peace, as said in the proposition. To recap, the proposition opening or constructive lacks inherency, its argument based upon the Pledge of Allegiance is invalid, its argument based upon the misconception of the Founding Fathers is invalid, and the proposition's usage of colored terms only serves to further perpetuate discrimination. In addition, the payment of reparations is not only unfeasible, but will surely lead to a collapse in the nation's economy, resulting in a recession, which will lead to even further and greater racial divides. Finally, my counterplan proposes to focus instead on education for impoverished African American neighborhoods. Thank you. This has been my opposition constructive. Thank you for listening.